The mountain path was familiar. Mark knew every twist. He knew every challenging incline. He had hiked this trail many times. He felt at home in the rugged landscape. But this evening felt different. The air was colder. The wind had a sharper bite. It whipped around the high cliffs. Mark pulled his jacket tighter. He rounded a narrow bend. The drop beside him was steep. Rocks plunged into shadow far below. That is when he heard it. A sound that did not belong. A sharp bark. It was desperate, full of fear. The sound echoed strangely. It seemed to come from below the cliff. For example, Mark stopped. He listened intently. The wind howled. It almost drowned out the sound. But there it was again. A panicked yelp. Mark's eyes scanned the rock face below. The light was fading fast. Shadows stretched long and deep. He searched the crevices. He peered down the sheer drop. His heart pounded against his ribs. Then he saw it. A shape, movement. About 15 feet down. On a tiny, precarious ledge. A dog, a German shepherd. The dog was trembling. Its paws scrabbled for grip. Loose scree shifted under its weight. Its eyes were wide with terror. They locked onto Mark. A silent plea for help. Mark froze. His breath caught in his throat. The ledge was impossibly narrow. One wrong move seemed inevitable. The dog would fall into the rocky abyss below. The wind gusted violently. It tore at Mark's clothes. It seemed like a warning. Time was running out. He looked around quickly. No other hikers. No signs of anyone nearby. Just Mark, the trapped dog, and the howling wind. They were alone on the edge of the world. Questions raced through Mark's mind. How did the dog get there? Was its owner nearby? Hurt? Lost? Why was no one searching? The questions were useless now. Action was needed. Urgently. If Mark did nothing, the dog would not survive the night. He could not turn away. He could not leave the animal to its fate. He had to try. Mark's pulse throbbed in his ears. He took a deep breath. He dropped carefully to his knees. He edged closer to the cliff face. He peered over the ledge. The German shepherd whimpered softly. It paced nervously back and forth, confined to the tiny space, trapped between the cold rock wall and the terrifying drop. One misstep, one slip, both the dog and any rescuer could be lost. Mark assessed the situation. 15 feet was not impossibly far, but the cliff face was sheer. Handholds looked scarce. Loose rock made it treacherous. He needed to be slow, careful, precise. He could not afford a mistake. Slowly, deliberately, Mark began his descent. He turned his body to face the rock. He lowered himself over for example, his boots searched for purchase. His fingers gripped rough stone. He tested every hold before trusting his weight. Loose pebbles cascaded down, disappearing into the gloom. The dog barked again, louder this time. Its eyes were wild with fear. It did not understand Mark's intentions. A sudden gust of wind slammed into Mark. It threw grit and dust into his face. He squeezed his eyes shut instinctively. His foot slipped slightly. His heart leaped into his throat. He pressed his body tight against the cold rock. He held his breath until the gust passed. He opened his eyes. He continued downward, inch by painstaking inch. Finally, his boots touched the narrow ledge. It was even smaller than it looked from above. Barely room for both him and the dog. The German shepherd backed away. It pressed itself against the cliff wall, shaking violently. Its teeth were bared slightly, not in aggression, but in sheer terror. Mark kept his movements slow, non-threatening. He spoke softly, calmly. "It's okay, boy," he murmured. The wind nearly snatched the words away. "It's okay. I'm here to help you." He extended a hand slowly, palm open. The German shepherd watched him. Its breathing was ragged. It hesitated. The wild fear in its eyes flickered, replaced by a glimmer of something else. Hope, trust. It stopped shaking quite so hard. It took a tentative step forward. Then another. It sniffed Mark's outstretched fingers cautiously. Mark seized the moment. His hand moved swiftly but gently. He grasped the harness the dog was wearing. It was a sturdy, rugged harness, made of dark canvas, dirt-stained and worn. He got a firm grip. "Okay, boy, let's go," he said, his voice firm but reassuring. With a grunt of effort, Mark pulled the dog towards him. He braced his own body against the cliff wall. He used his weight as an anchor. Now came the hardest part, climbing back up. Together, the climb was slow, agonizingly slow. Mark moved upward, securing each grip, testing each foothold. He kept one arm protectively around the dog, guiding it, supporting its weight when needed. The dog seemed to understand. It scrambled alongside him, its paws finding small cracks and bumps in the rock. Twice, Mark had to push the dog up ahead of him onto a slightly wider spot. Twice, the dog waited patiently for him to follow. Finally, gasping for breath, they reached the top. Mark scrambled over the edge onto the relative safety of the trail path. He pulled the dog up beside him. They both collapsed onto the dusty ground. Exhausted, trembling, hearts pounding in unison, Mark lay there for a moment, catching his breath, looking at the sky darkening above. The dog lay beside him, panting heavily. Its ordeal was over. As Mark sat up, he noticed something else. Attached to the dog's harness was a broken leash. The thick nylon was frayed, snapped clean through. Someone owned this dog. Someone had put this sturdy harness on him. But who and why was the dog alone? How did it end up on that lethal ledge? The mystery deepened. Mark sat cross-legged on the trail. The German Shepherd stayed close beside him, still shaken, but immensely relieved. The dog panted, its sides heaved, its eyes darted around nervously, but it made no attempt to run away. It seemed to sense it was safe now. Mark reached into his backpack. He pulled out his water bottle. He unscrewed the cap. He poured some water into his cupped hand. He offered it to the dog. The German Shepherd hesitated for only a second, then it lapped gratefully. Its tongue was rough against Mark's skin. Mark refilled his hand several times, until the dog seemed satisfied. Food was next. Mark didn't have dog food. He only had a granola bar. Not ideal, but better than nothing. He crumbled the bar into small pieces. He offered them on his flat palm. The dog sniffed the offering. Then it took the pieces gently, carefully. Its movements were precise, as if it had been well trained. Mark spoke to the dog, soft commands. "Sit," he said quietly. The dog immediately sat. Its tail gave a tentative thump against the ground. "Stay." The dog remained seated, watching Mark intently, tilting its head slightly. It was smart, very smart, clearly trained by someone who cared. But something was wrong. The dog flinched at sudden noises, the snap of a twig, the distant cry of a bird. Its eyes held a haunted look, a deep-seated fear. This dog wasn't just lost. It was running from something. Or it had experienced something terrible. It was scared, deeply scared. Mark gently examined the harness again, then the collar beneath it. He ran his fingers under the thick fur around the dog's neck. That's when he felt it, tucked under the fur, almost hidden. A small, faded metal tag, hanging loosely from the collar ring. The engraving was badly worn, rubbed smooth by time and wear, but Mark could just make out faint numbers. A phone number. He squinted in the fading light. He could read most of it, but the last 2 digits were almost completely gone, obliterated. Hope surged in Mark. An answer. A way to find the owner. He pulled out his cell phone. Service was patchy here, but he had a bar or two. He carefully dialed the visible digits. He tried guessing the last 2, 0001. He tried several combinations. Each time, the call failed, or went to a wrong number. Finally, he tried the most likely combination based on the faint scratches. The phone rang, once, twice, a long pause, then a cold automated voice answered. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again." Mark lowered the phone slowly. Another dead end. He stared at the German Shepherd. The dog stared back, its brown eyes full of unspoken secrets. "Who were you running from?" Mark wondered silently. Or who were you running towards? Mark hadn't planned on keeping the dog. He told himself that repeatedly. It was temporary, just until he could track down the rightful owner, find out where this dog belonged. But when they arrived back at Mark's small cabin, nestled at the edge of the sprawling forest, something felt different. The dog walked inside cautiously. It sniffed the unfamiliar surroundings. Then it seemed to relax. Mark set up a soft blanket near the fireplace. He filled a bowl with fresh water, another with some leftover stew he had. The German Shepherd investigated the offerings. It ate the stew quickly but politely, drank some water. Then it curled up on the blanket. It sighed deeply, as if it had finally found sanctuary, as if it had always belonged there. Over the next few days, Mark tried everything. He made found dog posters. He included a picture he'd taken with his phone. He described the dog, the harness, the location where he found him. He drove into the nearest town. He put up posters on community boards, at the general store, at the gas station. He called all the local animal shelters. He filed a found dog report. He posted details on several online forums, lost pets websites, community groups. Days turned into a week. His phone remained silent. No emails, no calls, no leads came through. It was as if the dog had materialized out of thin air, dropped onto that cliff ledge from nowhere. One morning, Mark was pouring coffee in his kitchen. The dog padded silently up behind him. It sat patiently by his feet, looking up at him. Mark nearly tripped over him. He looked down and laughed. "You really are my shadow, aren't you?" he said. The dog's ears perked up at the word shadow. Its tail thumped against the floorboards. The name seemed to fit. From that moment on, the dog was Max. It felt right. Max responded to the name almost instantly, as if recognizing a familiar sound, or perhaps just happy to have an identity again. Mark spent time with Max. He worked on reinforcing commands: sit, stay, come, heel. Max already knew them well. He was eager to please, but Mark focused more on building trust. He spoke gently, moved predictably, offered treats and praise. Slowly Max began to relax. The haunted look in his eyes started to fade, replaced by warmth, affection, loyalty. He followed Mark everywhere, his constant, quiet companion. Yet, there was still a lingering strangeness, usually around dusk. As the light began to fail, Max would go to the window, or sit quietly on the porch. His body would go still, his ears alert, pointed towards the dense forest that bordered Mark's property. His eyes would lock onto the dark trees, unblinking, as if he was waiting, watching, listening for something, or someone. Mark noticed it every evening. A silent vigil. There was something out there, something Max hadn't forgotten. The forest wasn't just the place he was found. It held a deeper connection. It was part of his story. And whatever that story was, it clearly wasn't finished yet. A week after the rescue, Mark decided Max needed a proper checkup. He seemed healthy enough, energetic, eating well, but Mark felt an urge, a need to dig deeper, find any clue about Max's past. He drove Max to the nearest veterinarian clinic in town. The clinic was small, clean, smelled faintly of antiseptic. Max seemed slightly nervous, but he stayed calm beside Mark. The vet, Dr. Evans, was kind and efficient. She gave Max a thorough examination, checked his teeth, his ears, listened to his heart and lungs, declared him to be in surprisingly good shape, especially considering his ordeal. Then, almost as an afterthought, Dr. Evans picked up a small handheld scanner. "Let's just check for a microchip," she said. "Standard procedure for found animals." She passed the scanner slowly over Max's neck and shoulders. Mark watched, not expecting anything. A small beep broke the silence. Dr. Evans paused. She scanned the area again. Another beep. She frowned slightly. "Well, hello there," she murmured. She looked at the scanner's small screen. Then she looked at Mark. Her expression changed, became serious, concerned. "This dog, he's registered," she said slowly. She turned the small screen towards Mark. Mark leaned forward, curious, anxious. The name displayed on the screen hit him like a physical blow. Staff Sergeant David Carter. Below the name, more information. Military veteran. Status missing. Reported missing over 1 year ago. Last known location, entering Aspen Creek National Forest. Further details. File marked with RED alerts. Status unconfirmed. Mark sat back heavily in the plastic chair. Silence filled the small examination room. Chills ran down his spine. Max, this loyal, gentle dog, belonged to a missing soldier. A veteran who had walked into the vast, wild forest over a year ago, and vanished without a trace. Max hadn't just wandered off a trail near the cliff. He had survived something unimaginable. Something nobody could explain. He was the sole survivor of a mystery. Within an hour, local authorities arrived at the vet clinic. 2 sheriff's deputies. They were professional, courteous, but their questions were intense. They spoke with Mark at length. Where exactly did he find the dog? When? What condition was Max in? They scanned Mark's phone logs, checked the photos he had taken, They wanted to visit the rescue site. They assured Mark he wasn't a suspect. He was a crucial witness. The discovery of Max, Sergeant Carter's dog, reopened a long-cold case, a case that had baffled investigators. One of the deputies, a man named Miller, explained the background. Sergeant Carter had returned from deployment. He had struggled with readjustment. He had decided to go on a solo retreat into the national forest for healing, reflection. He took minimal gear. No cell phone, no GPS tracker, just himself and his loyal dog, Max. He told friends he needed time alone. He was expected back in 2 weeks. He never returned. Extensive search operations had been launched. Teams combed the rugged terrain for weeks. They used dogs, helicopters, volunteers. They found absolutely nothing. No sign of Carter, no sign of his campsite, no sign of Max. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. Some speculated Carter had gone off-grid intentionally, started a new life somewhere. Others feared the worst. An accident, foul play. The wilderness could be unforgiving. And yet here was Max, alive, healthy, found clinging to a cliff edge miles from where Carter was last thought to be. Max was the only link, the only witness to whatever tragedy had unfolded deep within the woods. Through all the renewed attention, Max remained calm, composed. He sat quietly beside Mark. His eyes, however, kept drifting towards the window, towards the direction of the forest, as if the woods still held secrets, answers only he knew, waiting to be revealed. Life settled into a new routine. Mark cooperated fully with the deputies. He showed them the cliff ledge, answered more questions, but the investigation yielded no immediate breakthroughs. The forest kept its secrets. Max stayed with Mark. The bond between them deepened, forged in shared trauma and rescue. Then, one quiet evening, everything changed. Mark was reading by the fireplace. Max was dozing on his blanket. Suddenly, Max sprang to his feet. He stood rigid at the edge of the porch door, ears pricked forward, tail stiff. His body quivered with intense focus. He let out a low growl. Then, without warning, he bolted. He shot off the porch, dashed across the small yard, and disappeared into the dark tree line bordering the property. He began barking, not his usual playful bark. This was different, urgent, insistent, a sound filled with purpose. Alarm shot through Mark. He jumped up, grabbed his heavy-duty flashlight from the mantel, ran outside. "Max, come back," he yelled. But Max didn't stop. He plunged deeper into the woods, crashing through underbrush. His barks echoed among the trees. Mark ran after him, flashlight beam bouncing wildly, cutting through the oppressive darkness. Branches snagged at his clothes, roots threatened to trip him. The forest was thick, disorienting. Shadows danced like phantoms. Max never strayed too far ahead. He would bark, run forward, pause, look back to make sure Mark was following, then push onward again. He was clearly leading Mark somewhere specific. Deeper and deeper into the unfamiliar woods they went. Mark's heart pounded, both from exertion and a growing sense of unease. What had Max found? After what felt like miles, but was probably less than one, Max stopped. He stood at the edge of a small, natural clearing. He whined softly, looking from Mark to the clearing, then back again. Mark stepped into the clearing. His flashlight beam swept across the area. Beneath a thick tangle of overgrown branches and vines, almost swallowed by the forest floor, was something unexpected. An old campsite. Weathered, untouched, silent. Nature was slowly reclaiming it. Mark moved closer. His boots crunched on dead leaves. His heart pounded heavily. He saw a rusted kettle lying on its side, a moldy, decomposed backpack leaning against a tree trunk, torn pieces of faded fabric scattered nearby. Remnants of a tent, perhaps. And then he saw it, partially buried beneath fallen leaves and loose earth, hidden by time and the elements. Something chilling, unmistakable, human remains. A skeletal hand, part of a skull. Mark dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. A wave of nausea washed over him. He took several deep breaths, trying to steady himself. Max stood beside him, quiet now, pressing gently against Mark's leg, offering silent comfort. Mark reached out a trembling hand, stroked Max's head. He understood now. He pulled out his phone. His hands shook as he dialed 911. He reported his location as best he could. reported his grim discovery. Forensic teams arrived. The area was cordoned off. The investigation began anew. Days later, the official confirmation came. Dental records, DNA analysis. The remains belonged to Staff Sergeant David Carter, the missing veteran, the man Max had belonged to, the man Max had never truly left. Somehow, incredibly, Max had survived alone in the wild. For over a year, he had stayed near his master's final resting place, guarding him, refusing to abandon him, loyalty beyond measure. Mark finally understood the desperate bark he'd heard from the cliff. For example, it wasn't just a cry for his own rescue, it was a plea from a loyal soul, trying desperately to lead someone back to the truth, back to the master he refused to leave behind. A few days later, Mark arranged a small, quiet service, not a funeral exactly, more of a memorial, held near the spot where Sergeant Carter was found. Max sat solemnly by Mark's side throughout the simple ceremony. Mark placed a small American flag near the site, a humble tribute, honoring the soldier's service, his sacrifice. As Mark stood there, lost in thought, Sheriff Miller and another deputy arrived. They had come to pay their respects. They acknowledged Sergeant Carter's service, but they also spoke of Max, of the dog's incredible, unwavering loyalty, a testament to the bond between a soldier and his dog. The man who had saved the dog from the cliff edge now stood beside him, guardian, companion, forever linked by the events on the mountain. Mark looked down at Max. The dog looked up at him. Trust and understanding flowed between them. Mark was grateful for the unexpected turn his life had taken, grateful for the brave, loyal dog who had found him, and who, in turn, had allowed his lost master to finally be found. They stood together for a long moment, man and dog, under the quiet canopy of the forest, their shared story finally reaching its poignant conclusion.